What is value in the NFL draft and why the San Francisco 49ers might have passed on offensive linemen in the 2025 class on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Love our everydayers. We appreciate you hanging out with us all draft season. Let's keep it going as we head toward the 2025 season, week one training camp. There's a lot to get into. More deep dives on all the prospects the 49ers brought in, undrafted free agents as well here on Locked On 49ers. So make sure you stick around and subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. And today's episode brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more.
Peacock, do I gotta check my mail? Like, where'd you get that sweet Locked On hat?
This is my draft cap. You didn't get a Locked On draft cap?
Maybe my wife didn't check. My wife checks the mail. Maybe she hasn't checked it in a while.
I think you got to wait until it was like a birthday or an anniversary gift for the pod. You haven't been yet.
My birthday's in about 20 days or so. So 22 days.
You haven't been here for 8 years like I have, Croc. So you might have to wait a while if it's the 8th anniversary hat. I don't remember why they sent it to me, but it was a gift from the network, and it came just in time for whatever day we're on, day 3 of the NFL draft. And I forgot about it yesterday when we were doing our pod. So I got the new lid on, Locked On style. I don't think it's available to the public yet, but I'm going to rock it here on this episode of Locked On 49ers, talking about the 49ers draft. And we've been asked a ton about various things. And so I think it's important to get through this. And we just barely touched on it yesterday. It deserves an entire podcast, probably. Talking about the offensive line, where the 49ers are right now on the offensive line, and why they maybe didn't address the offensive line. And Croc, after day 2 on Friday, we talked about the same subject. And my mock draft, which was, I'm still, my shoulder actually hurts a little bit. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to play softball this week because I've been patting myself on the back because of getting 4 correct picks in my mock draft, but I'm really mad. And my buddy, who's a Raiders fan, sent me a clip from the TK show, Tim Kawakami, with Matt Barrows. And Matt Barrows said a similar thing that we said Friday, that I think the Las Vegas Raiders sniped the Niners right at the end of round 3, pick 98 and 99, right in front of the Niners. They had back-to-back picks, went O-line with both of those picks. Both of those guys, one of them was in my mock draft. It could have been an even better mock draft. Charles Grant was picked 99. I think 98 was Caleb Rogers out of Texas Tech, who's a player that we identified pre-draft, Croc, as somebody that the 49ers might be in on because he had a great short shuttle time, the best short shuttle at the combine, and the 49ers brought him in on a 30 visit. So the Niners did a lot of work on both of those offensive linemen, and they would have both been fits for the San Francisco 49er. Rogers a guard, Grant potentially a future tackle, could compete, swing tackle, could compete at guard this year. It's the exact type of players the 49ers could have used in this draft. I think, did the 49ers get sniped? Because Barrows is saying it. We've been saying it. I think the Raiders got the Niners potentially on that one. And we heard the 49ers talk about it post-draft because they were asked about it, and we've been asked a ton about the offensive line. How could the 49ers look at the offensive line's terrible? The 49ers have all these, it's going to be even worse later. And I want to talk more about specifically where the 49ers are at. But does it feel like the 49ers might have got taken a little bit, or not taken, but if it's all part of the draft game, Croc. And it's part of the draft value that we talk about. What does that even mean? And some fans hate it, and some fans get mad that we talk about value in the draft, or if a team reached versus consensus, or whatever it is. And some fans hate the 49ers do reach versus consensus, right? So which side of it are you on, Croc? And do you think the 49ers did get sniped in the draft on those offensive linemen before they were able to pick either at that pick or other picks?
Well, definitely, it feels like they got sniped for sure. I think that a lot of the fan base is under the assumption that if a very talented offensive line fell to the 49ers at a certain spot, that they just would overlook that offensive lineman and not take him at all. If maybe Campbell or Mimbo fell to pick 11, with the 49ers just been like, nope, we're not going to take either one of you guys. Like, I think they would have been like, hey, yeah, let's take them. I don't think they felt like those guys were there. I think those guys went high like the 49ers expected. So you don't even have a chance to get one of those guys. And then different spots. I did a mock. I took a tackle in my mock draft. That tackle was what, Connerly out of Oregon, or
Yeah,
Oregon.
Connerly out of Oregon. You went back-to-back Oregon. You went Harmon at 20 after a trade down, Connerly second round, early second.
Right. So, I'm thinking, oh, maybe the 49ers be able to get Connerly an offensive tackle. Well, he taken what, first round? Late first?
Yeah, he went late one to not the Texans. The Texans traded out. You know what happens to me, Croc, sometimes with the draft is I get in my head what fits seemed right pre-draft, and I have to remember what the actual real draft was, and that like the pick that I thought was a perfect fit, the player didn't end up going there, right? Like I feel like Ashton Genty should be a Bear, but he's not. He's a Raider. I feel like Mason Graham should be a Jaguar because he was in every mock draft, but then it's like, oh no, the Browns got Mason Graham, and Travis Hunter went to the Jaguars.
It kind of throws off where these guys went.
So Connerly went 29 to the Washington Commanders.
Okay, so 29th overall, right? Like I thought he may be there. Now, let's say in my mock draft, if Connerly in my mock went 29th overall, well, I would have went linebacker, the kid from UCLA. Now, the thing with that, in real life, how it played out was he was the first pick in the second round.
Right.
So you can have your idea on how you will go about it, but you identify certain guys that you would like to take in a range. And if those guys aren't there, then you have to pivot to the guy that's next on your board. I would love to see the 49ers address offensive line and start to have some guys that are there for the future. But like John Lynch said, we thought we had a shot at a couple of guys, and essentially said we got sniped in the process. And that's tough. When you are the 49ers and you're kind of planning this way and you think you may have a shot at getting somebody. Now, they could have been a little bit more aggressive with moving up to get the guys that they identify as their kind of guys, especially if you're late in the third round, but they didn't. So that is unfortunate. But I do think a lot of the conversation surrounding the 49ers and offensive line is that they just did not want to address it at all. I just can't believe that to be the case, especially when John Lynch comes out and says it.
I think it's both. I think it's that they wanted to address it, but did they really want to address it?
Did they need to address it as much as they needed to address defensive line?
They had other needs, and they don't value offensive line as much as other positions. So I think it's kind of both. And if it was a tie, it's going to go to the defensive line, which I think is generally the correct way to go about it. It kind of depends on the player and the defensive lineman. And I think the opportunities they had, the first one they really had was in round 2 when they took Alfred Collins. And again, I think they got sniped there. And, somebody that's somewhat connected tried to tell me that, yeah, they not only did they get sniped for TJ Sanders potentially, but they were actually making calls to try to trade up, and they didn't get a trade up. So first couple of rounds, they had made a few calls to try to move up to secure their guys. They ended up getting their guy in Mykel Williams. I don't know how true that is. I'm not a newsbreaker plugged in type, but that's what I heard. So I don't know if that is in fact true or not. Maybe they would have taken Alfred Collins all along, or maybe those calls to trade up were still to get Alfred Collins, and they got him just like round 1 with Mykel Williams. They got Alfred Collins, but TJ Sanders, the Bills moved up clearly to get in front of the 49ers to draft a defensive tackle. They got TJ Sanders at 41. 2 picks later, the Niners drafted Alfred Collins, and that was really the first opportunity where the 49ers could have gone with the tackle. Ariante Ursery went pick 48 a few picks later to the Houston Texans, and so maybe Ursery was that guy that they could have waited on defensive line, knowing that offensive line would potentially run out, and knowing that if they knew they could get, say, CJ West later, would they have gone with a different position, right? Did they not expect CJ West to be there for them later on in the draft? And maybe would that have changed things in hindsight with, pick 43? I don't know. But I think what the 49ers thought was defensive tackle is too big of a need. And if it's a tie, we're going defensive line over offensive line all day. And we think we can get a player in round 3 at blank position. And it turns out they didn't quite fall to them at pick 100, if indeed that was their plan. And I don't know for sure that was their plan, but you can probably put some things together and think that, yeah, that might have been potentially their plan at the end of round 3. I want to focus a little bit more on round 3 next and talk about value and talk about something that Director of Scouting Tariq Ahmad said in an interview yesterday with reporters talking about the 2025 class. And let's talk a little bit more about where the 49ers are on the offensive line next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and you wonder, where did all the money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. And you stop just managing your money, start building wealth. And I love the easy collaboration with Monarch Money. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
At Peacock, I have a question for you.
Okay.
What's I don't even want to say easier, because ideally you would just have the best at every position. But if you had a choice on what to try to get by with in the NFL, would you rather have an average offensive line or a bad run defense?
I'd rather not have a bad thing. So I'd rather have an average offensive line. You know,
That's essentially what the 49ers were. They were a team that was ranked, as far as their offensive line, they were ranked middle of the pack. All right. They were ranked 13th overall. And then their pass protection, 17th overall with a 37.1% pressure rate. The 49ers quarterbacks also held onto the ball over 3 seconds on average, which was the 6th highest in the league. So when you kind of factor in the pressure rate, it's like, well, they're not really getting the balls out of their hands. Now, that could be attributed to receivers not having Brandon Ayuk or the guys creating separation. But ultimately, what that tells me is, which we know Kyle Shanahan's offense is really, really predicated on timing and rhythm, back foot to ground. He really wants the ball out. That wasn't quite the case last year.
And so with Trent Williams, who usually misses a couple games per year, you've already lost some depth from last year on an already average offensive line. Could this start to fall apart quickly? And the big thing for me, Croc, is when you look ahead and you look at how it takes offensive linemen a little extra time, and you probably don't expect a lot of rookies beyond your first round picks to be able to step in. Like, it's rare what Dominic Pooney was able to do last year, and he might not even gotten the opportunity if guys in front of him didn't get hurt. Then he just didn't give the job back. And so it's awesome when that can happen, but that doesn't always happen. So with the offensive line, look, the 49ers needed to get better. You probably weren't going to draft anybody that was going to make you markedly better from pick 43 on in this draft. For me, the offensive line, it's about the future. And when you look at, I think Brendel has, I think his last year on his contract might be 2026. McKivitz isn't signed for 2026. Trent Williams could retire. We still don't know how left guard's going to turn out with Barch, who has an injury history. Trent misses some games. Burford is, battling with Austin Pleasance maybe as a swing tackle. Burford's probably battling at left guard as well. You got Hennessy, who's kind of got some guard center flexibility. There's a lot of there's still some depth on the roster, and essentially you replace Banks with Barch / Hennessy, and Hennessy can start games in the NFL, so you have that at guard center. So you have some depth, and Chris Foerster's done a good job of keeping that together and putting together a league average-ish unit. But when you start to look ahead at 2026, that's where it gets really dicey for the 49ers, especially if Trent Williams retires. And Trent Williams is going to retire at some point, whether it's this offseason or next. And, injuries might just force him to retire potentially, which is what happens a lot with older players. Like, what happens if he gets hurt again this year? And it's just like, you're done. You got to be done. And then now you don't have, any depth on the offensive line to handle that. So depth currently, which you can address with, a post-draft free agent, but it's the future that worries me about the 49ers offensive line more than anything. And if they start to drop below the line this year, And then you lose guys on top of it. Now we're looking at a thing where, okay, well, next year, now you're forcing offensive line and you're passing in another. So every year you start forcing need in the draft and passing on better players potentially at other positions. And then what do you end up with after a few seasons of doing that? You end up with the worst football team all around because you drafted for need and passed up on all. So that's kind of the problem I have with not setting this up well and having so many needs this offseason. It's past decisions that put them in this position this offseason, which made them make those decisions this offseason. So it just keeps adding on to itself. And in the end, the 49ers right now have an offensive line they can play with and have a defensive line they can play with, but they weren't able to get ahead of the need, add depth on the offensive line currently while trying to develop themselves a future starter, specifically at offensive tackle. That's why Charles Grant was like that perfect player and perfect fit. And he went the pick before pick 100. I had him at 75 in my mock, Croc, which makes me feel like I had a pretty good beat on what the NFL thought of these players, right? Which is somewhat close to what the consensus was as well. I was off on consensus with how I looked at players. Clearly, the 49ers are off from consensus with how they looked at some players. But when it comes to, and I'm kind of putting both offensive line and myth of and value into one idea here, Croc. So I want to hear what your thoughts are on it. Value is BS when it comes to the draft because you got to just draft the best players. But the draft is also a game. And understanding how the league values players can help you draft better and in turn make you a better football team. And as long as the 49ers are drafting good players, that's a good thing. But if you're bad at understanding how the league is going to value players in the draft, then you're making yourself worse. And I think the 49ers are good at one of those things and bad at the other.
That reminds me of, house shopping, right? You have money. You have money available. You want to buy a house. Maybe you have a budget, right? And it's like, well, I have all the money in the world. I can spend however much on this home that I want to. But are you going to go into a bad neighborhood and there's a house that's marked up, I don't know, 50%? Are you going to pay 50% on the price of that house just because you have the money to pay for it? Or are you going to say, you know what, I'm not going to get a house in this neighborhood. I'll try another neighborhood. I like the house, but not at that price when the comps right next to it are much lower. And I think that's how the 49ers are looking at it, like, well, we got the money, so we got the draft pick. You might as well just pick the player because, well, we like them. And it's like, right. Well, I got the money to buy a house. Who cares if my neighbor paid, $600,000 and they're making me pay $750,000 and they just bought theirs last week. Who cares? I want the house, so I'm going to spend way more on it. I think that's kind of how I view the value of these draft picks. I mean, you can still get the player and he could still be awesome. Did you have to pay that much? Or was there someone else that maybe you could have gotten that in that range that could have been a good football player as well? And you wait and see if you could still get that same player you like, maybe just a little bit later where the value meets more where the NFL views that prospect.
And to take that, I think it's a perfect analogy. And to take that even a little bit further, the other thing you can do is call the bluff on the seller. You're like, I'm going to offer what the comp says, and I'm willing to walk away from it if you're trying to sell it to me too high. But I'm going to still make the offer because I could still get that house. I'm just willing to pay less for it because there's no guarantee that someone else is going to pay that price on that house, right? So you could make the offer you think it's worth and see if you get it or not, but be willing to walk away and go look in another neighborhood for another house. And the thing is are you investing or are you don't care because I just am going to buy this house and live in it. And this is my favorite house, so I'm going to pay more for it. And so from that standpoint, I understand where you're at. Like, who cares what the value is? This is our player. We don't want to lose this player. We're going to draft this player here. And for me, I'm looking at more of an investment and I'm thinking, I'm going to make the offer on this player that I think is worth and willing to walk away. Because guess what? There are other homes. There are other linebackers in this draft, right? And right or wrong, I don't know. The 49ers have been right on players that they've drafted higher than consensus. They've been wrong on players they've drafted higher than consensus. But I want to go back to, and I didn't quite get circle my.
If you, regard one second, if you if you buy the house for 150,000 over the market price, but 20 years from now you're still living in it, and now the value of the houses around you are more expensive.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe it was a good buy, even though you paid 150,000 more than what anybody else that bought it at the same time in your neighborhood paid.
And now you're grandma and grandpa and you're hosting Christmas and the kids grew up there and you're having a great time and it doesn't matter. You could afford the house and you're good and you love the house and it was your forever home, right? Meanwhile,
real estate people will say you're an idiot though.
Yeah. Well, the real estate folks own 5 houses because they went and bought the one that was the better value and then sold it for more value. And, and they got a house in a better neighborhood with a gate, right? Because they played the game. And so the 49ers aren't good at playing the draft game, but they find their guys and they're just trying to find homes that they want to live in. And that's what they've done. That's what they did in this draft. I want to go specifics too, Croc, because in my opinion, this is just little old me. But I'm going to base it on consensus, based on what I think about the draft. I've been doing this for a long time, Croc. I don't work in the league, but I am going to give you, Eric Crocker, I am going to create a free 3rd round pick for you to use in the draft, because I think that's what the 49ers could have done for themselves if we want to take this all the way down the line here with what they did in the draft. And it's why I disagree with what Tariq Ahmad said in the post-draft presser. Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Playoff time in the NBA, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking your favorite team or diving into player props, from 3-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. And if you listen to this podcast, hopefully you made some money on some of those NFL draft props too, which is one of my favorite ways to play. You can still bet on the Niners to win that Super Bowl next year, by the way, in Major League Baseball every single day. And you know what? How about this for NBA playoffs? After the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into same game parlays for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. So download the app or go to FanDuel.com. So, Croc, a player I really liked for the 49ers, who I mocked to the 49ers in round 5, Nick Martin, linebacker out of Oklahoma State. Niners drafted at pick 75. The player I mocked,
consensus, he was 170.
Yeah, consensus 170. So the 49ers are way off from consensus. That doesn't mean there wasn't another team that was ready to take him at pick number 76 either. But that's kind of where I'm going with this. And this was part of the Trey Lance thing. And clearly the 49ers screwed up the Trey Lance thing, right? Like that was bad. That was bad from the start when they traded up.
Don't get me started on that.
Don't
get me started on that process.
They lit 3 first-round picks on fire. So like you can be mad and say NFL value. What is value? That's BS. You go get your guy. You got to go get your guy. Well, luckily the 49ers did some other things and found Brock Purdy and they kept their jobs. Most times, if you do what the Niners did in the 2021 NFL draft, you were fired and you might not get another chance to do it from another team, because that's like one of the most egregious mistakes we've seen in a long time, in our lifetimes in the draft. Niners came out of it, right? So to argue that the 49ers are good with finding value in the NFL draft is probably not the side of the argument you want to be on. The argument of the side of the argument you want to be on is NFL draft value doesn't matter. You just got to find your guys and hit on the picks, which is good. But again, you're not maximizing what you could do in the draft. And then you look at, there's lists out there. The 49ers have been worse in the league at quote unquote reaching, right? And you look at the list and who are the teams were the best in quote unquote not reaching in the NFL draft. It's teams like the Eagles and the Baltimore Ravens. And those teams are really good at team building, right? So it's kind of hard to argue that there isn't some benefit in playing the draft game. And when you look at what Nick Martin was, really good player, loved the run and hit. He's 5'11 and a half, 220 pounds, Croc. He's closer to the size of Malik Mustafa than Fred Warner, like by a lot, right? And he's not the type of prospect that generally goes in the top 75 picks because of his outlier size. And maybe he goes pick 76. Maybe he goes to another team. But guess what? Chris Paul is still on the board. Jeffrey Bossa is still on the board. There's a lot of other players and it's not a one-player draft. And I was correct in thinking that Charles Grant was not going to be the San Francisco 49ers, if we're going off the idea that maybe the 49ers got sniped for an offensive lineman. So let's just say this. Let's just say the 49ers played the draft game, and not even using my opinion, use the consensus draft board's opinion, and drafted Charles Grant at pick 75 and waited to draft Nick Martin later. I believe there's a 99% chance that Nick Martin would have been there for him at pick 100, right? Well, guess what? Now you just got both players by understanding the league, utilizing maybe consensus draft boards, not saying that that's the way you go about it. But I believe the consensus draft boards were closer to how the rest of the league feels about those two players specifically. I'm just using those players because, this is not hindsight by me. This is not, these are players that, that have been reported and the 49ers did draft, and they're, I'm just using those players. Could be different players that we're talking about. But essentially, if I believe, and if you go by consensus draft boards and Nick Martin is still there for the 49ers in round 4, late round 3, even late round 4, essentially what you did is you created yourself a free third-round draft pick by just playing the draft game better, Croc. And that's a significant value of just understanding how the league values players. And you might miss your guy, but maybe you developed yourself a future offensive tackle, and maybe you got Chris Paul at linebacker instead. Maybe you got Jeffrey Bossa at linebacker instead. And guess what? There wasn't another linebacker that was drafted for an entire round after Nick Martin got taken. Now, again, maybe you don't get your guy, but it's not a one-player draft. And that's where you have to play the draft game, I think, a little bit more. And the 49ers aren't good at that. And the other side of that is I think they still would have gotten their guy, Croc.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Paul, we watched him, kind of a similar kind of guy as Martin, right? I mean, did he look as explosive? I would say no, but he was that like undersized, athletic, did a really good job. I mean, we liked what we saw from him on film. Well, he was drafted in the 5th round, as well as Jeffrey Bossa. So yeah, if you're playing the game that you're saying where, hey, let's take this guy because he's higher on the consensus board. Let's take this offensive tackle. It makes the 49er fan base happy. It makes Croc and Peacock happier that they address that position, right? And then later, okay, we'll still like this linebacker. Well, we're still, even if you get him at pick 100, that's still much higher than he was projected to go. And then again, if he's not there, then there's still other linebackers that have a similar skill set. And it's not like it's 100% guaranteed that this guy's going to be a hit. So even if you're like, well, we missed out on him, okay, but we got these guys. Hey, then let's double back him. Matter of fact, we draft Chris Paul and Bossa, 2 guys that, we really like, and we brought this guy in for a 30 visit and all that. That feels like more of the right way to approach it, as opposed to the way that they did it. Yeah. Going all in on a home and saying, well, this is the only home that we want. Even though, hey, man, these houses all right here, they all look the same. This neighborhood, they built all these houses at the same time. There's a couple of different models, but these houses essentially are the same. And it's like, well, nope, I'm going to pay $150,000 more. Like, that's the part right there where I felt like the 49ers could do a better job of playing the game. And now, you would have that swing tackle. You would have that guy for the future, because that was your argument, right? It wasn't even so much that, well, the 49ers 100% have to address tackle this year for a starter, which I think that's more the fan base's thoughts. Is like, hey, no, you draft a guy 3rd or 4th round because he needs to start. You're saying, well, even if he doesn't start, you like the guys that you have. Maybe a guy goes down or whatever, right? But you like the guys that you have and you want to add somebody. Well, next year, you may not have McKivitz unless you're willing to pay him what McGlinchey probably got. Because I think if McKivitz plays just like he played last season, he's going to demand a lot of money on the free agent.
I mean, the one of the things about the 49ers' current offensive line is I think a lot of fans don't see how bad offensive lines are around the league. Every team needs offensive linemen. And yeah, McKivitz could make a lot of money. It might be more than the 49ers are willing to pay. Here's the other thing, or you're forced to overpay McKivitz to keep him around. He should get more than Jalen Moore got. Jalen Moore got a nice little bit of money, right? And he was just the swing tackle for the 49ers last year. But here's the other thing, and it brings me back to the point of draft value and playing the draft value game. And Croc, we've been doing this long enough that a 220-pound linebacker is probably not going to go as high most drafts as a 6'5", 310, really athletic, projectable future starting offensive tackle is going to go in the NFL draft. So I don't think you should expect that that Charles Grant is going to fall further than Nick Martin is going to fall in an NFL draft. I don't think you should think that. And so I think the 49ers, if that was the equation, and it might not have been, then I think they got that wrong. And I think there's plenty of evidence to show the 49ers aren't good at playing the draft game, but they go and get their guys. And that should be the argument. The argument shouldn't be that you're really good at understanding how the league values players and all that and knowing the landscape. Your argument should be that we just get our guys and we don't care. That's what the 49ers do. And they've built a really good roster, and that's fine. And I do like Nick Martin. I think he's a really good player. But again, he's a 5'11" and a half, 220-pound linebacker. And those guys generally don't go high. You know who does go high? And the 49ers have told us they've had such trouble finding guys that they like at offensive tackle to draft. And well, if you are you just never going to draft a tackle? Because that's what's happening. The 49ers will never draft a tackle if that's the case. You won't have one. So you better hope that the next Trent Williams is available for trade with the 4th round pick or whatever. Like that was a one-time deal. They're not going to get that again, right? So at some point you have to find a tackle you like well enough to draft.
Well, McKivitz, he was a guard. He was drafted to play guard. It just didn't work out. He got cut, came back, and then in a pinch had to play tackle. And he's like, oh, well, actually, I think he can play tackle. Same with Spencer Burford. Like, he's an athletic tackle with good size and length and everything, kind of profiled as a tackle. And he's like, no, you're going to play guard. He hasn't even had an opportunity to play tackle. So, yeah, maybe part of their equation is having a tough time identifying what tackle works, like not just being a perfect glove fit, but what kind of tackle can we draft if it's not in the first round, right? Because it's easy. You and I can pick out a first round tackle that fits what they do. But when you start getting to the second round, third round, they're having a tough time identifying a guy that fits what they want as a tackle. So maybe they have to kind of change the way that they view some of these mid to late round offensive tackles that they want to play tackle and not just put at guard. Like, and when is the last time they drafted a tackle to play tackle past the first round?
Anthony Davis? Right?
No, but I think that was a first round.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying a tackle, period.
The kid out of Florida, Trent Brown.
What year was that?
That wasn't this class. Remember, they didn't like him. They traded him away.
Yeah, but no.
But that was like 2000, maybe 15 or 16, and he was a 7th round pick.
2016. Okay, yeah. It was a bulky pick, yeah. Was that bulky's last draft? 2015, I think it must have been.
Yeah. So with this regime, though, when have they drafted outside of the first round? Because you did get Mike McGlinchey. I mean, shoot, outside of Mike McGlinchey, how many times, with Jalen Moore, maybe? Did they draft Jalen Moore to play tackle?
Jalen Moore, 5th round pick. Yep. And kind of play a little guard, and then end up being swing tackle for him and filling in really well last year for Trent Williams. But they haven't given themselves many opportunities to even get lucky and find a tackle. Like basically almost zero opportunity to even get lucky and find a guy. So
could Dominic Pooney not have been a tackle?
I think he might be. I think that's your answer. So you're looking at least at you still have to, if I had to bet right now who's starting right tackle in 2026, I'd probably say Dominic Pooney. Okay. I think that's a possibility. But then again, you still need a left tackle after Trent Williams, and then you still need to replace guard. You might still need to replace the other guard, and you probably need to replace center at some point very soon too. So they have a lot of needs on the offensive line. And I don't want it to be where you show up for the 2026 NFL draft and it's like the defensive line version of this year's draft or it's the offensive line version of this year's draft where it's like, well, there might be another player that's really good, but we can't draft that player because we have to draft an offensive lineman. And the Niners might be there next year.
Have you ever played blackjack at the casino?
Mm-hmm.
Where, you kind of fall behind a little bit and then you start trying to chase that money and trying to just at least get that money back.
Yeah.
That's kind of the 49ers right now after this season where you kind of lost money, lost players or offensive tackles. And now you have to try to chase it in the moment as opposed to playing ahead. And I think that's where they're at with the offensive line.
Yep.
So 49er fan base, if you guys are listening right now, it's not that we think that this offensive line is so great that you don't need to address it at all. But the bigger issue right now is preparing for the future and not having any plan right now with how you're going to do it, and not taking any swings in the draft to give yourself the opportunity for the future. For this year, I mean, I don't know what you do. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's why I'm like, they draft a guy, like, okay, yeah, draft a tackle, cool. They didn't find their guy. I wasn't giving them a hard time for that. But I think your point with, man, next year, they're going to be a lot of trouble on that O-line because they just haven't addressed it.
Yeah, and again, like I get it. Like, we didn't really like the offensive lineman at the picks each time. It's like, okay, but that happens every single year. So at some point, you got to find one. And it's also not to say that I didn't like the draft. I actually like the Niners 2025 draft a lot more than some fans. I think it was a really good class. And this wasn't a Nick Martin thing, because I like Nick Martin a lot. I think he's going to be really good. I think he's probably going to win a starting job at some point, potentially as a rookie. And he better if you drafted him that high. But again, he's an outlier size-wise. And, Stout is an outlier size-wise. And so they better be good, because it's tough to expect outliers to be the maximum of what they are. And the 49ers drafted them to be the maximum of what they are, where they drafted them. And I do think there was an opportunity for the 49ers to potentially draft a player at, say, pick 75, and some other players would have been available for them later. And all you're getting in that case, if you just move the others down and they're still there, I think Nick Martin wouldn't have been there. And if he wasn't, there was going to be another linebacker. Be that much better than those guys? He might be. But if they played the draft game, they could have come out even further ahead and had an even better draft class, potentially. And it's a common theme for the San Francisco 49ers. So that's where we are. Is draft value a myth? Sometimes it's BS, but no, it is not completely a myth. And I understand why people get frustrated on both sides of that coin, being mad about saying they overdrafted guys or reached for guys, and also being mad about them reaching or overdrafting players. I see both sides of that.
It's the players you miss out on when you overdraft. That's what I learned from this conversation.
Yeah, and it's not just one thing. It's not just like, oh, we had to get our guy this time. The 49ers clearly do not care about draft value, and they give up picks and they trade up and they're very aggressive. And in some cases, they just light picks on fire, right? So you can't argue that the 49ers care at all about draft value or how the rest of the league values players. They care about how they do, and that's okay too. That's their style. And they've built a pretty good roster doing it. All right, thanks everybody for making us your first listen. We're going to break down all of these draft picks by the San Francisco 49ers, 11 picks, some undrafted free agent, deeper dives on all of these guys, some really good prospects, and I really do like this draft class from the San Francisco 49ers. So stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Croc and I back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.